want to give us all time to sit and fight, so you guys can have some fun. So grab some weapons. Let's do it. Yeah, cool. All right. So you see, while they get ready, I'll just kind of prep. And then others will come out and talk as well. So you see, we all have a lot of gear on, and safety is really paramount. These are heavy steel weapons. All of them, they're all blunted, they're all not sharp, but they are still all about 3 pounds and less of weight, so they have a heft to them. The guys are going to fight longsword first, which is about a 3-pound weapon. It's a oh, she's got it, cool. So it's a 2-handed weapon. And as you can see, we kind of have very heavy gamisons, padded jackets, hard protection on the elbows, knees, shins, throat, groin, and our masks have a back of head protection as well. So again, we want to try to be as safe as we can. We're not going 100% here. We're not even going 100% when we're at the school, because we want to keep learning and fighting and have people to fight with every day. So if we hurt each other, that kind of screws everybody up, all right? So safety is super important for us. You'll see we all wear different kinds of gloves on our hands. They are all protect our fingers and bones. They are very easy to break, and these are, heavy steel, solid steel weapons. They do bend. You will see a lot of thrusting from all of us. That is attacks with the point. So in order to simulate penetration, right, you want to actually see a bend. That means it's actually, if it was sharp, it would be penetrating into your opponent, and that bend allows us to see that and know that. When everyone fights, you'll see us stop, acknowledge the hit, reset, and keep going. Right? We don't just continually fight. We want to say, oh, I did get hit. You'll see us tap in certain areas. That's where we got hit. In the way, well, HEMA in general has two real sides of the coin. One is a historical aspect. Everything you're doing here, we're doing here, and everything we teach came out of various manuals, instruction books, treaties, over time, right? We're going to go back to some of the oldest weapons we have instruction for, sword and buckler, up to some of the newest ones, military saber and rapier, and side sword. So I'm going to stop talking for a little bit. The guys are going to fight, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to presume one of them just tried to grab the sword of the other. All right. Absolutely valid, absolutely legal, right? If they can release one hand and grab the other opponent's weapon and control that weapon, they absolutely can, right? It doesn't necessarily take away from any of the impact or any of the hits that are happening. So again, every part of the body, from the ankle up to the fingers, are valid targets. So that's why you're seeing hits to the hand, hits to the leg. Now in a real fight, sorry? Not feet usually, because feet really aren't armored. So for most of the tournaments that we'll go to and we'll participate in, we kind of keep the feet off limits just because, right? So it's a safety thing as well. I try to go down, it hits the sword, you trip over it. You know, we just try to be as safe as possible. So grappling, which is that close range fighting, is also allowed in all the weapons. In tournaments, in practice, we don't take each other to the ground because there's just too much risk of injury to that. But we do want to control the weapon and land a point, land a hit, and attack. Strikes to that pommel, so the back end of the weapon, that's actually the only weapon, only part of the sword that is truly a weapon that was historical. So, Caleb and I are going to fight Saber for you guys now. I'm going to turn over to Lex.
All right, what you're going to see now is drastically different from longsword. So this is a sword in one hand. You're going to see their bodies are a lot more bladed, which is they're presenting less of a target. With longsword, you need the structure of your whole body to get the mechanics correct. With saber, it's a lot easier to do with just one hand. And this is why you see it in the movies. Good honor. So you're seeing slightly different offhand positions. A lot of people hold their left hand behind their back just so it's not a scoring target, because it is valid in tournaments. And then you see Tom on the right in the black, he's got it on his side, because if he can arrest the blade with his offhand, he has a free opponent to hit. But there is a risk if you get distracted. There it is. Nice. So another variation you might notice with saber versus longsword, it's a much smaller, faster weapon. You're a lot more nimble with the tip, and so you're able to actually drop around the sword rather than forced to bind out the longsword to protect yourself and then attack your opponent. With the saber, you're kind of playing a game of, it is chess for both, but it's slightly different with saber having to fight where their sword is not. Footwork, body position, movements and steps, they're all bluffs and feints. Trying to size up your opponent to see what they'll attack on, see what they'll try and block. If you half commit something and then cut somewhere else, you're very likely to hit them successfully. Nice. So it may not seem like it, but this is actually really hard work. It's kind of a mix of aerobic and anaerobic exercise. There is a lot of endurance involved. You've got really thick, hot gear that you're wearing. That's kind of exacerbated by these stage lights. Good job, guys.
Yes, it is hot and tiring under the lights with these heavy jackets. I don't know what the guy's going to fight next. What are we doing next? Sword and buckler? So, sword and buckler. One of the oldest instructional treatises we have is on sword and buckler. It's actually a bunch of monks drawn and how to deal with attacks. A buckler is a small 14-inch, 12 to 14-inch, 12 to 16-inch shield. It actually is a one-handed held weapon. The sword is what we call an arming sword. It's also a one-handed sword, 33, 32-inch blade. hang on a second. Can I have an arming sword?
Yeah, here.
Very different than the longsword that you saw. Very different than the saber. No hand guard. So the buckler is essentially a guard for your hand. It's not a shield the way we would think a shield. I'm not trying to parry an attack with the buckler. I'm trying to parry with the blade, trap with the buckler, and then re-engage with the blade to attack. They are flexible, but they are still stiff and rigid, just like the longsword is. It is a one-handed weapon. It's meant to be wielded that way. So they're gearing up. Again, you'll see a lot of different hand protection. Some weapons that have complex guards don't require as much hand protection because the guard protects your hand. This weapon does not, longsword does not, so you will see heavier weighted gloves on the guys. Padded fingers, padded wrists, padded back of the head. So, buckler, held in one hand. Arming sword, the other, and let them go. What Lex on the left is fighting with is actually a messer, so it's a long German knife. So it's a little bit shorter than the arming sword that Rock has on the right-hand side. And again, any area is the target. What they're trying to do with the buckler, you can see, is either protect their hand, or as Rock was doing, and as Lex is doing now, it's out in front of them to create a cone of defense. Right, and they're closing off areas of attack. They're giving their partner fewer opportunities to hit them. It's a chess match, right? I want to be able to give my opponent an area to hit me so I know how to defend and counterattack. They're trying to do the same thing at the same time.
Oh, nice.
Thrusts, attacks with the point, and edge attacks, cuts are both obviously allowed. You may even also see, I don't know if they'll do it or not, you can use your hand that's in the buckler to still grab your opponent's blade while the buckler is on the back of your hand. So you may see that with the guys as well. So you see there's a lot of respect, a lot of respect for your fighter, respect for the art. So they're not trying to necessarily, destroy each other. They're not landing heavy blows. They are acknowledging when they get hit and moving forward. It's a strategy. If it works, awesome. If it doesn't work, you're like, uh-oh, I don't have my buckler anymore. But it is very much a strategy. Great job. So now we're going a little bit farther up in history. We've kind of went back and forth. We went longsword, was kind of 1500s, 1600s, and thereabouts. Saber, 1800s, 1900s. Now we're going back a little bit to rapier and dagger. So rapier is primarily a thrusting weapon, but also has a sharp edge on both sides. So cuts are absolutely allowed. It is a one-handed long weapon, but there is also a dagger in their offhand. They can score a point with either weapon. So think Princess Bride. And yes, you can cut with a rapier as well. Huh?
Take out.
Yeah,
So you can go fight.
yeah.
Cool. So right away, both opponents are holding their daggers differently, and that changes the mechanics of how they're trying to displace the rapier so that they're safe so that they can make their thrust. Caleb in the gray has it just kind of in a handshake grip like you would a regular, like a military saber. And then Tanner is using a sail guard, which has that beautiful curved piece that protects his hand. There it is. And he's holding it in thumb grip, which means it turns into kind of like a windshield wiper effect. But you see both have quillins. They can try and trap the rapier with a twist, and that allows them to counterattack with their rapier. Amazing, guys, that was awesome. Whew. Sorry, it's hard work. So right now, there's a lot of changes happening really quickly. Caleb in the gray is in a very defensive position with his left foot forward, which means his dagger has better reach. And then if you want to move into a more aggressive stance like he is now, he's got his right foot forward, his rapier has a longer, quicker reach. You kind of sacrifice time when you're switching to a more defensive stance because you have to lunge a lot further with that right side to get that rapier out. But you are much more defended. The faster you can displace that rapier, the safer you're going to be. Nice thrust. It's one of the more dynamic swords to fight with. You just have so many more things to keep track of. 2 weapons, as well as your opponent's 2 weapons, and then just reading their body language, their footwork. You've got distance and timing. It is a massively complicated multi-level chess game. Oh, yep. Yeah, what happens a lot with rapier, since it is a gentleman's sport, it came in the late time frame for warfare and duels. So the war rapiers were thicker blades, but they quickly kind of faded out into more of a gentleman's sporting weapon, which is more of what you see here. So there's various different systems, but most of the time it's dealing with dueling or just gentleman's sport fencing, basically. Very elegant, but also just a good way to blow off steam. Oh, you're both dead. Oh, nice throat grab. Good job, guys. That was awesome. All right. Now we've got Tom and Rock doing Messer. This is a German short knife, long knife. There you go, long knife. Swords had been banned on the streets, and so the peasants were like, well, let's just make a long knife, and we can still fight. So they have a nagel, which is that tiny little flap of metal just to help protect their hands a little bit. But for the most part, this is very much of a distance parry riposte. You're going to see a lot more leaning mechanics. Because it is such a short weapon, you have to be a lot closer. So it's actually faster and safer to lean back because the geometry of your opponent's cut and the geometry of your body allows you to be just outside of the reach of that arc. And then it's a lot of efficiency of motion.
So you'll notice with Messer, they change guards quite often. So what you're doing is you're opening and closing what we call lines with each other. So if you basically took a string or a rope and placed it between you, that would be the line. And then as you, normally you'd kind of rotate some and not stay quite as linear. But what they're doing is by putting a blade across, they're actually opening creating openings. Like Rock has, you don't really want to attack his leg, but he's trying to get you to attack there so he can just swing and attack your head. Similar to that. And so what they both did there is they both saw an opening, but the problem is they both ended up dead. Does anybody have any questions?
Go for it. When you go in a circle? Yes. So we are to a degree, right? We're kind of fighting to the terrain at our disposal right now. We can't really go too wide because we don't fall off stage, right? So as you see, we've moved a little bit. But yeah, we would usually, the rings in our place are about 20 by 20 square. So we do absolutely move around. We're being a little cautious. We don't want to go off the edges. It just gets dangerous. But it depends on the weapon set too. A saber is a very linear system regardless of where you are. Whereas longsword and things kind of circle a little bit. Yes?
How heavy is the
This gear, I don't know, 20 pounds altogether probably. Jackets are about 4 pounds, masks, so all adds up with everything on. 15, 25 pounds depending on, but good question.
Out of all the places, how many of the blows that you were counting would have actually ended the fight?
How many would have ended the fight? Really depends, right? Any cut to the face, you're gonna, even if it's a light nick, you're gonna kind of coil back from that. It depends what the opponents are wearing, if they're wearing a thicker leather, if they're wearing layers of linen. Some of those lighter cuts might not penetrate all the way through, but we do a lot of practice cutting. We have live blades back at the school, and periodically throughout the year we will get to Tommy mats or different mediums and cut through it. Because again, what we're trying to practice is edge alignment, proper structure and mechanics. Any of those thrusts you saw where any of those blades bent, that's penetrating, right? Totally. So, before we take into the questions, we got a little about 15 minutes left. We're going to do some fun stuff at the end with what we call shock knives. It's a stress-inducing tool that we use. It's actually kind of a mini taser around a Bowie knife, so you'll hear it and you will see that spark. But before we do that, we always kind of like to ask you guys, what do you want to see? We can do some mixed weapon fighting. Any thoughts on what you guys might want to see? Different weapons against each other?
two-handed sword?
Two-handed sword is the long sword. Yep, cool. We can look. I'm going to take a whole bunch, so we can.
Longsword versus rapier.
Longsword, rapier. Everyone asks for that. It's such a good fight. Bow staff and spear, pole arms. So let's do this. Let's do longsword, rapier. Longsword, rapier. All right, cool. So while they're doing that, pole arms, not safe to fight with, because they don't. No matter how you make them, they're either way too floppy to be too safe, or they're way too dangerous if they're not. So yeah, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, and we'll talk more. We have a kind of a historical session panel tomorrow afternoon for those that are going to be here, where we're going to talk a little bit more about pole arms and the ways to defeat that and getting inside your opponent's space and deal. It's all about distance and measure. But yeah, it would be great if we did, but safety's really an issue with that. So Lex has a longsword, Tanner a rapier and dagger. That's a better dagger than mine was. Yeah. So we did this matchup yesterday. Lex and I had the rapier and dagger. I have a different dagger. It's a parrying dagger. What Tanner has is called a sail dagger. It's a more stout, robust weapon with a bit of a hand protection. So he can do those parries, right, and have a little bit more leverage over his opponent's blade. With my dagger that I had yesterday, I really couldn't. So it's good to see that. Oosh. Any other thoughts for next weapon set? Large shield fight. Yeah, yes, we don't have any. But from a HEMA perspective, our shields are usually limited to the buckler or what's called a rotella or a targe, a little bit bigger of a shield or a rectangular shield, but not the big Roman kind of, shields for we play with them. I've got, some of us have background in Kinjutsu, so we do play with them. We have them at the table. We did a little bit today, but we didn't bring them up with us here, so we're looking more on the European side.
Buckler versus rapier.
Buckler and rapier. Rapier and buckler. Sure. All right. Do you want to do rapier with him or want me to? All right.
So most of the time in tournaments, you'll have same weapon, same weapon. We like to have fun by mixing things up. So sometimes we'll do, like we call it King of the Hill or King of the Ring. And so you go until like 2 or 3 points or 1 point first hit, something like that. And whoever wins that fight stays in the ring. And then if you win against everybody else that's competing, whatever weapon they have, then you end up becoming King of the Ring. The last time we did it, I think Sword and Buckler actually won that one. But it just really kind of depends on the night, depends on who's fighting with what weapon. It's not always that, hey, I'm the best at whatever, or that somebody else is. It's how well do you utilize that weapon against something you're not used to fighting.
So I'm not going to use a dagger because you just said rapier and sword and buckler. So we're just going to do rapier and sword and buckler. It's going to be interesting.
So you'll notice Rock will probably try to keep his distance until he can kind of control Tom's blade, and then he'll try to come in close, because once you get close on a rapier or a longer weapon, a lot of times you can kind of keep them out without them being able to cut or stab you. So scoring system in most tournaments is going to be 2 points to the head or body, and body is considered like inside the shoulders. And then any sort of extremities is typically 1 point, so legs, arms, fingers, hands, are all just 1 point. And typically it's given, you'll do like a deductive scoring. So if I hit somebody in the arm, but then they immediately hit me in the head within, typically we call it 1 tempo. So basically if they're in the motion of striking as I hit them, then it's also counted. So I would get 0 points and they would get 1 point because of the deductive scoring. So you can actually go through a fight, you can get hit, but you can actually have no points scored against you. And a lot of times in the way you get out of pools is it's more of a score based, not necessarily if you won or lost, though generally if you win the fight, then you'll have a higher score. So normally you go to about 9 points, sometimes 7. It kind of depends on, like, if you've got like 90 fighters, it's hard to get through that many in a day. So you'll reduce the amount of points that need to be scored, so that then you can kind of restrict the time frame some. And there'll be different tournaments that have different, a little bit different rule sets. For example, if you have like a rapier tournament, they'll restrict, hey, we want this to be more of a thrusting tournament. So they'll basically say, hey, a thrust to the head is 3, or leg cuts are not allowed, or leg arms are not allowed. It's only a thrust to the body, or a cut then could be to the body or the head, but it's going to be lower scoring. So you can kind of tailor it to how you want the fights to progress.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? So you can definitely do pummel strike. So as you get in close, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll present the pummel. So what that means is, because we don't really want people to be hitting each other with a pummel, because it's actually pretty dangerous. You can give people concussions. So basically, as you get in close with that grapple, if you've grabbed their blade, and then a lot of times you'll have your pummel up to their face, and then you'll get the scoring points. And that'll be, depending on the tournament, most of the time it's the same as getting a headshot. So, because collapsing somebody's skull with a pummel is definitely, it can be a good tactic, yes.
How does the Star Wars movies, like when you're looking at it, how much of it is accurate in terms of footwork and skill?
So it's definitely, there's a lot of skill, but the cinematic side, I mean, even if you go and watch almost any sword fight, anytime you turn your back to somebody doing a twist or a turn, or it's pretty dangerous, because what you're doing is you're taking your sword away from protecting yourself, and you're opening yourself up to being hit. So like if you go watch like Anakin and Obi-Wan in that last fight, which is amazing to watch on Geonosis, it's probably not very realistic, except they're Jedi, so they can sense when somebody's going to hit them. But in reality, for us, you typically don't want to turn your back to the opponent.
So you guys aren't Jedi?
We are definitely not Jedi.
I'd love to. Find a lightsaber, I kill myself.
So I'll give the mic to Tom.
So I just wanted to introduce, so Lex and I are going to do one last fight, I think. We might do something after that, who knows. These are shock knives. They are stress-inducing training implements. That is a charge. It's a 9-volt battery, so it's not going to knock us out, but we'll certainly feel it, right? So with this, and we actually didn't do a dagger fight before this. We usually do a dagger fight before this, because you'll see us, we'll land quite a few blows to each other's faces and arms and heads, because it's a dagger. It's a rubber training instrument. You will see a... Yeah, we can try. Yeah, so you'll see a lot less, hopefully, a lot less hits with these, because we don't want to get hit with these, right? So it's a lot more of, let's be careful, let's take our time, and kind of go from there.
So the intent of the shock knife is really to kind of get that adrenaline up, because it's a little bit more than just getting, I mean, you get hit by a blunt weapon, it still hurts, but there's something psychological about, hey, I'm about to get cut or shocked. Now, if you watch their feet, they typically like to step on the other's foot, and then they grab the hand, and then you can, so you see that front foot go back and forth. And one thing to point out in a dagger fight is typically nobody will win. So even if you go and block, you will almost always get cut. But typically you'll want to get it to where they cut you in the forearm or somebody where it's not as bad, and then you can then deliver that final blow, or multiple. Sorry, what was the question?
Are there buttons on the handle that trigger it?
Correct. Yeah. So there's a button on the actual handle that you press when you want to trigger the shock. And it's definitely one that is a little bit more exciting as you go further into the day, because as your clothing gets a little bit sweaty, that shock will actually spread out a little bit more. So knife fighting has been around for a really, really long time. So you'll actually find there's different like Italian manuals and things that you can actually go and find on like strictly just knife fighting. And it's always obviously very close up fighting. So it's over typically very quickly. It would definitely not drag out like this. But as you can tell, they're both exhausted. Thank you, guys. Looks like we got 5 minutes.
Cool. So yes, there are even modern Bowie knife, American Bowie knife, and Macklemore system, and a few other systems that teach that. They all trace their roots back to various European systems, preference, style, and then layers and layers of masters and adding their own personal flair and greetings and salutes and everything else. But essentially what you're doing is the same thing with any weapon. You're trying to present a target that I want my opponent to hit, so that then as I do that, they can remove that target, it's no longer there, and my hand is there, right? So it's all about, and while she's doing that, I'm trying to think the same thing, so I want to be here as well. Depending on who kind of attacks first, she voids that target, I'm here, but then I can also, but she checks, so I can't come back with what I was planning as my counter. So it's a chess match. Thank you. Any other questions?
Do you ever use 2-dash?
Sometimes. Yep, sometimes.
Do you ever use a knife where it's like pointed backwards?
Reverse grip, yeah. So a lot of the historical styles, Meyer, Fiore, Mayer, as you go back in time, yes, they are in this ice pick type grip. I don't want to do this with this knife because it is still charging. Oh, cool. So Rock are going to do rondelle, which is a dagger. So a rondelle is a triangular blade with very small little rondelle guards on the pommel and in the handguard. And yes, but think of the historical context for that. You have people with plate. So you're going for the points in the plate where you can come in or come around or come up. Later on, when you've got people in linen or you're on the street, later in Renaissance times, Italy and France and things like that, you can use the edge of that knife a lot more because you're not trying to go through plate, right? And again, it's all context, right? The cool thing about now is we can play with all that context, right? They all called all these swords. We have names for every one of them. We have different ways of doing it, and a lot of people that wrote a lot of things down that worked, which was really cool. So if it didn't work, they didn't write it down. That we can kind of learn from and grow. So, other questions? I think a couple was there.
How does one get started?
Cool. We're not advertising necessarily, but we do offer classes 6 days a week. We have military saber classes that we run on Monday nights. We do a yoga with sword, kind of a longsword yoga on Tuesday nights. Rock runs our longsword program on Wednesday nights. We actually have a beginner's program on Thursdays. It's an 8-week program. You can join anytime in those 8 weeks, and it takes you through all 3 of our main weapons, so you can go into those classes knowing the basics and the fundamentals. So, Rock's going to be in an ice pick grip. Lex is not. So you can see it's a lot more arcing attacks because that's the way my body moves with that knife in that position. Whether it's arcing horizontally or arcing vertically, I'm not going to thrust, right? Even though he just did that. If it works, you get a gold star.
Fight with an arm. Faster than fight with a knife.
A little louder, I can't hear you, sorry.
You can fight faster with a knife grip than an arm.
Yeah, it's a, sure.
That's nice, but it doesn't have any practicality.
There's a lot of discussion and debate around that over time. It's kind of like a forever debate, right? Yes?
Is there a particular weapon that you think is a good starter weapon?
The weapon that you're the most interested in is the best one to start with, because that means you're excited about it, you can learn. That could be your heritage. That could be, I saw some movie that I really love and I want to be like, cool, whatever works. I love saber, Caleb loves saber, but we all fight with a lot. Rock loves longsword, so does Lex, right? But we all fight with different weapons because we kind of just have that opportunity available to us. But the one you like the most is the best weapon for you, right? Definitely. Try them all, we say, and then see which one fits, right? Where do you buy a sword? There's a lot of online places. Be very, very careful because it depends on what you're doing with that sword. For a decorative piece you're going to hang on the wall, awesome, right? They got some great, amazing vendors inside that can get you that. If you're going to fight with it in a controlled environment with the protective gear, and I got to emphasize that, you saw Lex and I fight without masks. That is the only weapon we will ever fight without a mask on, even warming up and just playing. Nice job. Everything else. We've had really good friends that know each other for years just warm up before a tournament and accidentally catch something the wrong way and prevent one of them from fighting in the tournament. So most clubs probably around the world, definitely around the country, I'm sure around the world, really don't encourage that at all. You have to have the right protective gear because you want to do this for as long as you can. And there is no age limit, sky's the limit. I'm 53. We've got kids that are 14, that are 15, 16, and all the way up, and we've had folks older as well. So there is no age to this. It's just the amount of getting out there, finding something you love, and just kind of going with it. Questions? Go ahead, go for it.
What's the starting cost?
So yeah, not an inexpensive hobby. We do have a lot of loaner gear at the club, especially on the weapons side of the house, because again, we don't want someone going out there and buying a $200 jacket, a $100 mask, a $300, $500, and $800 sword because they're excited about it. See what you like, and then build your gear up over time. We always tell people, first 2 things you should buy is a mask and gloves, because they're yours. You can sweat in them, you can get them, they're yours, right? Mask is $75, and a pair of gloves when you start to learn drills and partner drills is a good pair of lacrosse gloves. The gloves we have, are $200 plus gloves and up, right? Because we're using them 4 or 5 days a week in some cases, right? So a lot of application with them. But yeah, good startup, a couple $100 gets you into the sport. And it is a sport, right? There's multiple applications. We all love the historical side of it as well, at least most of us do. But we are all active tournament fighters. We travel around the country and hopefully in the next couple of years around the world fighting. We are all in our own right ranked somewhere globally. And we have, some of the best fighters in the country in the region, which is awesome. You go a 3-hour radius of where we are, and we've got some amazing fighters. It is an incredible community, and that is a lot of what we do, right? We find we're hanging out before class, after class, getting dinner, getting drinks. We go to a tournament, we fight people we never knew before, and all of a sudden we're hanging out afterwards, getting drinks, because that's why we're there. Right? It's not about trying to go and win, even though all of us always want to win. Someone has a good day, someone has a bad day, but it's nice to just go out and kind of build that community a bit, right? So there are clubs all over the country. Put you on the spot. So Chris runs Tennessee, so Nashville, right? Nashville Historic Fencing. He's up. His daughter's got a booth in the Artist Alley. So we've been hanging out and talking all weekend, which has been awesome. Huh? Yeah, he came over Rapier class today and came to the school. So usually most clubs around the world have an open door policy, right? If you're there and you've got gear, or if you don't, come hang out and come fight, and because it's kind of the way it is. There's not that big of a population around the world, so we have to encourage each other to fight. Any other questions? Yes, sir. You want to take that one? Mace, hammer?
Mace and hammer?
Mace, hammer, any blunted weapons, impact weapons?
So the major problem with impact weapons is it is incredibly hard to find ones that both handle realistically and don't smash my friends' faces in. Like all the swords you've seen today, they're all blunted, they're all sportified versions of a sword. But when it comes to something like a quarterstaff, you really can't make a training quarterstaff. The big stick is the big stick, and it does big stick things. The other primary reason we don't really study it is because there's not any sources on it, really. Everything we do is based off of historical sources. So unless there is a source for it somewhere, we really don't study it. Maces, they're not really depicted much in many manuscripts. There's a couple manuscripts that show stuff like a baton, quarterstaff, flails, but nothing on like hardcore mace fighting.
Well, the axe.
What's that?
The axe.
The axe? So honestly, there's not a whole lot of axe depictions in most historical manuscripts either. The closest you usually find is like a halberd, so like a big polearm with an axe head, or a poleaxe, which is more like a war hammer than an axe really. We don't really play with those because once again, they hurt people, even when you try to be gentle with them.
We've got about like 1-2 minutes left, so maybe one more question and then I'll have to call it.
You guys have fun? Awesome. So we are in Hall C. Easiest way to find us is we are right behind the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man in the entertainment hall, which is by where the wrestling ring is, in there. So tomorrow we're going to do some lightsaber training with kids in the kids zone in the afternoon, and we're going to do a kind of more of a lecture format with a little less fighting about the historical progression of arms over time, and we'll show more of a progression of time of the weapons. That's tomorrow evening, but come by anytime. We've got weapons there. We're going to be here for a little bit while longer tonight, and
Yeah, feel free to stop by the booth. You can handle some of the weapons, take a look at some of our kit. I've got a couple of the manuscripts you can ooh and ah at if you like Renaissance art. Otherwise, if you wander the exhibition hall and you hear a bunch of clanking, we got bored and set up a ring somewhere, so come looking for us.
We will tomorrow, probably, yes. So, thank you all very much.